You are, I can tell you, very fortunate to be in this building with Costis and all that the business school has to offer now, having experienced it in a very different time at a very different location when we're in a very different place. But as you said, the common thread is McKinsey. Perhaps the more important thread that joins us together. Sorry, Jane, I'll get out of the flowers.
Yes, that's better.
Is I grew up in Australia, and Jane thought Australia was so great she moved there for a bunch of years. So 5 years. So
My high school years were there.
So we're sort of fellow Aussies, kind of. Certainly Commonwealth.
I suffered working for James for a number of years at McKinsey, so anyone wants some stories on that later, I'm happy to share them.
And I have Jane's performance reviews, so
yes.
Depending what she tells you, I have evidence. She was always brilliant.
I have far worse on you than you have on me.
You were a brilliant consultant and one of the thought leaders in the whole Global Institute, which was the first think tank that Jane worked on with a woman called Deanna Farrell and Lowell Bryan, I think. Yep. You were the ones who launched it. So, and she joined Citi in 2004, became CEO in 2021. So I've watched her as a friend. We've had dinner together out of the city where we both have a place. We've been colleagues together. On paper, I was her boss. In practice, I'm not sure that was true. And we were competitors together for a couple of years. So we've had a lot of shared experiences. This is
Smith Barney.
Smith Barney, absolutely.
Crisis. Yeah,
that was the one. Right.
The lesson from this one is be really nice to everybody you work with because they are going to show up sometime later in your career.
Actually, really true.
Yeah.
And
I
think, but you've done brilliantly. I think you're in arguably the toughest in terms of complexity job, certainly in financial services, and maybe in the world. So. It's a real credit to you what you're doing and the way you're changing Citibank. I want to talk a little bit about Jane's background, just a few things, because you can Google a lot of this stuff, but just it's good to hear it from her. A little bit about the transformation she's doing at Citi and a little bit about her leadership style. And most importantly, give you a chance to ask her some questions. And we'll keep it pretty light and conversational on the way. So I just wanted to start with the background. We're all shaped by experiences in our life and the way we grew up, and you've had a very interesting background. Just what are a couple of the things on the personal side and then on the professional side that have helped shape you such that you can do the kind of job you're doing?
Yeah. So one of them was when age 12, I moved from Scotland to Sydney, Australia. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I think I had. And that shift just opened my eyes up to the world and to thinking about new possibilities, different things that you can kind of reinvent yourself. You can do things differently. And that definitely was a moment that I made my kids do the same thing when they were age 13, moved them to New York from the UK. So that really did give a bit of that confidence that, you can go and do something completely different. And I ended up moving to Spain after I'd been an analyst at Gorman, didn't speak a word of Spanish, wondered why on earth I'd done that when I was on the plane going there, but I learned a lot in a completely different culture, and it's given me a bit of the, no, you can do this, girl, feeling behind me. Another one was, and I remember talking to James about it when I was at McKinsey. I worked part-time for 5 years at McKinsey as a partner when my kids were born. And I remember talking to you about it and saying, how do I try and shape that program a bit? And I remember you telling me, just tell everyone, have the confidence in yourself that you just said, and define what you need, and then make it work for you. Don't be apologetic. Don't try and fit in. Say what you need, and then work from there. So that was very helpful advice. And being part-time enabled me to have a career and be a mum and feel I was able to be a mum. I was around when, with the kids in the mornings or in the evenings. When they went to start going to school, I would have longer time during their vacations, and kind of shaped it. And I think it made me realize that your career is in decades, and you've got to measure things that way. And it's very hard in the moment to make what you think is a tough choice on a career, but actually when you look at it, and I look back on it now and say, yeah, that was a good call to do that, and it didn't hold. Oh, my clients told me that I was much more empathetic from maternity leave than when I had been kind of the geeky analyst that was trying to get the deck perfect. Whereas when you're trying to then balance other things, I became much more 80-20 focused and spent more time with clients. And then I'd say the big shaping one for me in my career would be what I call the Nancy Pelosi moment. And that was Vikram Pandit was the CEO at Citi. He pulled me into his office. We'd been working through the financial crisis together. I was running strategy, which just meant I was selling a lot of things, including Smith Barney to James as part of the team. And he called me up and said, I want your development plan. So be in my office the next morning. So I quickly wrote my development plan that night, which I do not recommend you do. And he literally just tore it up in front of my face. You remember when she did that behind the president? And he said, you're thinking about it all wrong. And you've got to think about your career in terms of not how do you get the job you want, but how do you acquire the skills, the assets, and relationships to be successful in the job you want. And I took an entirely different career path thereafter, much more lateral moves and basically filling out the different things which enabled me to have this seat.
Did Vikram, by the way, he's a graduate here too, and has been on our board.
Columbia fan.
Was he, and obviously was CEO, did he talk to you about potentially becoming CEO back then? I didn't realize you had that exchange with him.
No, he basically gave me what was to get the C-suite jobs. What was the grid that the board of directors looks at to assess C-suite and senior management candidates? I never thought of CEO. That was not in my mind at that point. But I began to see a path of saying, okay, I need to think about how do I get built-in ability and understanding of investors, of analysts, of activists, of the Hill, of regulators, of the boards. I began just basically filling in the grid of what were all the different stakeholders that you have to be adept at. I moved into different jobs. I moved from the private bank, which was serving billionaires in London, to running our mortgage business in St. Louis, Missouri, actually 50 miles outside of St. Louis, Missouri, because it was moving to running more of a factory business. It was going to get a lot of attention from the regulators. It was a big turnaround situation. I'd done a small one, and a very different set of risks than the risks you manage in the private bank. I was having to learn mortgages, securities with it. And everyone thought I had really, really screwed up. I was being sent to St. Louis to do it, but it was perfectly logical to me because it was filling in the grid of different things that would help build the experience. So if I did get a C-suite role or around the reporting to CEO, I would have the different assets and experiences that would help me be more useful, successful in the job. It was really, really good advice.
Yeah, no, it's, I think too often people, and I'm sure it happens to you all the time, people come to you and say, sort of, how do I get to be you?
Yeah.
And it's not the job that you're trying to shape. It's as you said, it's building the capabilities to deal with very complex situations.
And I have to say, what a fascinating life. Because I've lived in London, running a global business from there. I lived in Missouri, ran a business there for a couple of years. And I went down to Latin America and ran Latin America. So a Scotswoman working for American Bank, running Latin America. and had a whole range of different experiences in emerging markets I never imagined, and then here in the States. Because the other thing you want is an interesting life. You know, you want to live life fully in your personal and professional life. And, you know, that's...
But before I let you escape the personal stuff, when you got out of Cambridge, you went to Cambridge, right? University undergrad. Before coming, you went to Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
We'll forgive you for that. But when you got out of Cambridge, what did you have a vision for what you would do?
I mean, at that,
You're going to be a ballerina or a bank CEO?
I knew what I wanted to do until I was in my early 40s. So I thought of much more in 2-year increments. I did 2 years as an analyst at Gorman out of university, and then 2 years in Spain. And then came to the States because thought US, so I wanted to understand the US machine. Then was at McKinsey, because in those days there were no women in investment banking. I'd been doing M&A, and I was like, okay, I'd like to have some balance, but I also wanted the strategic sort of things were interesting. And then we moved and I thought, okay, an associate at McKinsey be really interesting. It was fascinating. We had a great group of people. There was a real apprenticeship culture. And then, and I got married, and we moved to London for my husband's career. I was at McKinsey. Then it was having kids, wanted to have kids, work through that. And then I decided I wanted to do rather than advise. So I joined, and I liked global firms, so I joined Citi. And it was really only at Citi that I kind of felt like I'd grown up a bit more, because, you know, you've got kids, you've got the responsibility, but I kind of got a lot of those different elements of life lived. And then turned to, you know, a more serious career, as it were, in an institution. And even there, I just had absolutely fascinating jobs. You know, the global firms, you have such a variety of experiences, like you did.
But when you become CEO, somebody once said, I think it was John Whitehead, who was co-head of Gorman before they went public. He's a wonderful man. He said, with power, some people swell and some people grow. And I know you very well, and you don't swell with power, you grow with it. But how do you stay, what keeps you grounded? What are the things that bring you back to reality?
I wake up every morning feeling the responsibility, and that sense of you better be your best self that turns up, because you're in service of a lot of people, a lot of clients, a lot of our employees around the world. So that that one.
So it's the humility of recognizing the challenge of what you're trying to do.
And a sense of you're on a mission. Like I know what I want the firm to look like, and to shape it, and to try and galvanize the organization behind it. But I got great advice from Peter Henry, who was at Stern Business School head for a while. He's over at Stanford now. And he's on our board. And he told me, he said, 2 things you've got to have as a CEO is big ears and thick skin. And because it's hard to listen. And you've got to really listen more and more, because the more senior you get, the less you actually get told stuff. Although I get the download of everything in the ladies' restrooms. It's sometimes a little awkward, but you get told truth in there by all of the assistants and others in. So you've got to find those places where people approach you as a human being.
Feels like a competitive advantage.
That's where. But it's that listening, and really, what is it people are telling you, what it is that's going on, and getting that listening skill is important. And if you aren't grounded, people won't tell you anything. They'll just tell you what they think you want to hear, rather than to try and help you do things.
So let's talk about that. Who do you go to? Who are your truth tellers? Out there, apart from Bert?
Yeah, my husband. Yeah. Well, my 2 kids. They can't quite believe that I'm competent to do anything. I think when you all become parents, you'll discover that. So, well, my kids are pretty good. They'll give feedback on some bits and pieces. Then my head of HR is very good. He's about a decade younger. She was chief of staff to the previous CEO, so she's got a lot of experience. And she will just tell me. She'll tell any of us on the management team. You'll just get this team saying, "Stop talking in capitals." You're like, "Oh God, what have I done?" Or she'll tell you where you're screwing up on different things. So that's always helpful. I find my chief of staff goes deeper down the organization, and she finds out what's going on. So I've got a young team that works for me, and they're the ones that go out and find out the real truth and tell you. Our head of comms is very good. My chairman is very good. We have an independent chair, and he's good at giving some feedback. And then I have former Citi employees who I've worked with in different places. They often give a very good, frank, inside-out view.
Sometimes they're too frank, aren't they? Former employees.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but you've got to listen to it, and then you
Filter.
calibrate. You can't be you're not responding to every piece of criticism, which is where the resilience comes. You stick to the plan, you keep the faith, you know what you're doing. But you've got to be mindful of what some of the dynamics are.
So let's talk about Citi for a minute. March 21, so 4 years and a month in. Mission accomplished what % so far?
Oh, do you ever feel you're anywhere? I remember it. I think it was at McKinsey. One of the partners used to always say you're probably maybe 20% qualified for the job when you get it, and about 40% when you leave. And so the mission is probably about the same. I feel
Well, against what you've sort of laid out for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so I would say probably about 50% of the way of what I wanted to get done to that. I called it, we were old Citi, we're a different Citi. I think of what the new Citi will be. And I think we're over 50% of the way there.
That's pretty good.
But it will change. But then it's the next.
The ball moves.
Yeah, it then moves because AI is changing things. Other things will be changing things. But I kind of look at it and say, at some point you've got to assess, is it better to be in someone else's hands at this point? Because I do think CEOs are for particular times in a company's history, and you've got to be pretty realistic about what are you the right person for what time, and at some point you're not going to be, and having the ability to assess that. And I think usually, if you're honest with yourself, you usually know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So among your intimate friend group here,
yes,
what would you share as some things you are proud of you've got done, and then a couple of things you're disappointed?
I'm proud of the fact that we put enough time into talking to people and getting clarity early on about what the vision I had for the firm was, and then the strategy that we should put in. We were a universal bank, so retail bank, credit card company, onshore wealth business, as well as our whole institutional business in almost every country that we were operating in. And that was just impossible. And you can't be that global with so many local businesses. So we refocused the bank around saying we will be the preeminent bank for an institution or individual with cross-border needs. And we're a bank in almost 100 countries, but we do business in 180. So I needed to narrow the focus, get around a singular client base, and then get the businesses they needed surrounding them, and then get out of everything else. So we got out and just did it really quickly, including a business that I'd run for 5 years, and say, okay, we're going to exit those, and got that done quite fast. It was a lot of work. And the businesses we're exiting were about 25% of our employee base, so we wanted to sell rather than to wind things down, partly to get shareholder value, but it's also far more humane on the institution. Then we did a big reorganization once we got these local businesses sold, so I could then restructure the firm around the business lines that we're in, and then flatten the organization a lot. So we took 4 layers out. That's tough. And then last March, I remember our HR head telling me we had 50,000 people with a new boss from the reorganization that we'd done and the shifting of the structure and the flattening. And so therefore, a lot of the focus, which I hadn't anticipated, how much is really then trying to get everything reconnected again from a social point of view so the place can operate, everyone knew how to work together. The toughest stuff is firing people, so choosing the management team, because a lot of the people that helped me get the first 2 years done, that then enabled us to do the last 2 years, weren't going to be the right people around the table. So I think you always regret not moving fast enough in retrospect, and moving on people, but just try that. That's hard, particularly if someone's done a great job and you're saying you're not what we need for going forward. So I always try and use how would I want to be treated if I was in that person's seat? And usually it's I just want to be told straight, and don't try and pad this out. Just tell me straight and then help me. So that's what I try and do.
I would give you,
That's hard.
Yeah, I'd also give you credit. I think you've rebuilt the team a lot. And honestly, you've kept, as big as Citi is, and it's sort of it really is the world's biggest bank in terms of reach and range of businesses. You've kept it out of the news. I mean, it's been relatively trouble-free.
Yeah.
Thing that complicated, which is cultural. It's there's been some sort of cultural shift inside there, which I think it's obviously early, but you take some credit for that.
You galvanize people when you've got to go through a lot of change. You galvanize people on the destination, like where is it you're going to? And the same when you're asking people to change, you don't tell them they need to change. You tell them about what it is you need for the future, and then help them get there. But if they're not, explain to them that what we need is something different.
Yeah.
But it's like golf. You love golf. My younger son is a really good golfer, and he taught me you succeed off your strengths. You don't succeed off fixing you've got to make sure you don't derail yourself, but you will succeed off your strengths. So understand what they are and build around that. And I think that's what we've tried to galvanize a lot of the organization is what are you great at, and how do you really use that to your strengths.
So what's one thing that you haven't got done that you wanted to?
The regulatory side. Yeah, the regulatory side's been really tough. Some of that can be hard because it's very focused around sort of not necessarily the material financial risks you face, but sort of more of the crossing the T's. And I always used to say I left Europe to come to the States because of the entrepreneurship here. And I do think a lot of our client industries are saying it got over-regulated and started missing the point. America is about growth. It's about competitiveness. It's about innovation. It is extraordinary, the capabilities the US has. And with all the turmoil going on, the economic advantages of the US will still be utterly differentiating. That's one of the pieces I think is important.
I don't know if you have this number in your head, but in my last year as CEO, we submitted our annual capital plan to our CCAR plan for the Federal Reserve, and it was 83,000 pages long.
Ours was 127,000 this year.
And
I mean, it's just insane
30
stuff.
banks submit these plans.
Yeah.
And in 6 weeks, they're somehow analyzed, evaluated, and adjudicated on in 6 weeks. It's complete nuts.
Yeah. So I think there's some of these things you've got to start when you work with the regulators. It's trying to lay out what it is you think is more important for them to focus on. And again, if you don't have a clarity of a vision of what's important, where things are, and lay that out, if you just complain to them about, well, it's too bureaucratic, it's whatever, I had a conversation today with one of ours where I'm like, look, we've got 400 people working on something backward-looking in fraud. Can I please put 350 of them in protecting fraud for the future and just wind it back to 50 that are working on this? And we made a pretty compelling case as to, look, we'll all look pretty stupid if we've done this backward-looking stuff as opposed to protecting people where fraud is going. You have to learn how to get people off things they're entrenched into and galvanize them on a vision on the future.
Well, I've got a few more questions, and I want to open it up. Because there's so much stuff we could talk about. Just one, this world is a little crazy right now.
You think?
Yeah. and I'm retired, or sort of retired, so it's easier for me to deal with. But
skilled.
How you hanging there?
Yeah. It's that whole noise signal thing. I really thought about how do you lead. This was probably about a month and a half ago, saying, okay, how does the best self turn up? How do I lead? And it was one of the ones of conveying calm, giving clarity and conviction to people as this is what you need to focus on. Some reassurance around values, that the North Stars are unchanged. Talking as well, making sure that you're not, things are aligned to your values when they're not. This working? Yeah, there we are, it's better. Being straight about what are some of the changes we had to make and why. But most of the stuff is just keep people calm and focused and still believe in the mission and the direction they're going, and just try and be that steady voice for the organization, and just bring the emotion down. I got so angry with a group of senators the other day I met with, because they were so caught up in being outraged. And I was just like, guys, do your job. And, just get down, take some deep breaths and do your job. And that was a very helpful moment for me to say, okay, do your job, be the best person, turn up. You're not going to get it all right. Be straight and just keep driving forward.
Let me ask you a couple of questions on leadership. Firstly,
careful, because I might ask them to you, because he's one of the when in a phone a friend, I often James is one of the ones of phoning a friend.
You're nice.
No, you do. You give me good advice.
Advice is worth what you pay for it.
Yeah. I paid for it.
Yes. So now you're getting me all confused.
Good. That's the other thing, is use humor to knock people off there.
It can work too. Some CEOs, particularly in our industry, speak a lot publicly. I tried very hard to have the brand of the company speak and me sort of be underneath it. But there are times when, we were just talking about it before, when you have to speak up. There are things, and then there are a lot of things you want to speak up as a citizen or as a human being, but you can't, because every time you open your mouth, you're the Citigroup CEO speaking. You're not Jane Fraser, citizen. How do you manage that? What's your sort of North Star of when to open your mouth and when not to?
Yeah, I got a lot of advice on this, because it's not something that comes easily and naturally. Certainly, a lot of things don't come easily and naturally. And on this one, I grounded on, okay, you're the CEO of a global company. I'm not a politician. I've got to run the institution independent of the politics, and because we're in Venezuela, we're in Honduras, we're in all over Africa. So actually, a lot of the things that go on there beyond rule of law are far worse than things that have been happening here. So there's also, it does ground you from experiences elsewhere. And And so I look at where does it affect our people? Where's it affecting our client? Where's it affecting our franchise? We had 11 families in Parkville at the high school near Fort Lauderdale where there were the shootings. We had a number of employees who had fatalities in their family in Vegas when there was a big shooting there. There was a series of 8 of them, and we had all of our families, and one employee killed, but it was a lot of it was family members. So this really meant a lot to our the families of our employees, that we advocated for responsible firearm use and practices. And that was something that we spoke up on at the time. And it was important to. But there are other ones where we won't, because it's not impactful for actually the stakeholders of the company. But it's hard. It's a hard road to navigate.
You've got to be
when things swing.
You've got to be consistent. I mean, I remember, I forget, like you, I used to get many emails from employees. Why aren't you speaking on this issue? And every now and then I'd just call up the employee.
Yeah.
And they'd say, well, I'd say, it's James Gorman. I'd like to talk to you. And they'd say, well, why are you calling? I said, you sent me an email. I didn't expect you to read it. Yeah. It's a response. But the question I'd ask them is, you're saying I should speak up on this issue in this way. What makes you think I'm on your side of the issue?
Yeah.
And then they say, well, maybe you shouldn't speak up. I said, good answer.
Yeah.
Right? So let's not let our personal views come into it. But I'm sure,
really
and you're in a, I mean, we were a very global company, but Citigroup is a different kind of global company. It's in it's got so many retail presences. So you're touching hundreds of millions of people, not,
Yeah, although the consumer side's gone now, so we've sold that.
That's true.
But we're still, we've been in China 124 years. In India the same, in Japan, in most of the countries
cards
we've been
business.
in 100 years. So there's also you're almost local, and rather than an American bank.
So let me ask you about, because of all those countries, I know you travel a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know how you look so well for somebody who travels as much as you do.
James, and hair dye.
Hair
dye twice a week,
Okay.
every 2 weeks.
All right. I've clearly lost that battle. How do you deal with the stress? I mean, just you come home at night. What's your favorite drink? Your favorite TV show? What do you do to just chill?
What I find is I enjoy the client side of the business a lot. And so going and talking and getting out around the world and meeting different clients. And it's an incredible privilege. I mean, the people you meet, I think of Africa last year, I was in Cairo, in Lagos, it was down in Joburg, and a number of other, Nairobi, a number of other countries around. And you learn so much. And different cultures, different perspectives, what's going on, where the challenge is.
Do you have a favorite African country?
Botswana.
Oh.
Yeah. So you are aware of the privilege that you're in, and that you're learning things and having experiences you never would have imagined. Neither of us would have. And that definitely. And then the other piece is, you've got a job to do, right? There's a mission here. There's a sense of it. There's a lot of people depending on you. And if I'm stressed out, that's really unhelpful for everyone.
Okay, I'm going to open it up.
How do you do it? Yeah.
How do I deal with stress?
Yeah, how did you deal with it? You had an ability to sleep well all the time.
What's that?
You always used to be able to fall asleep all the time.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just when I was presenting.
No, it's a true story. I'd sit in my office, I'd shut the door, and as soon as you shut your door, people think big things are going on, right? So it's a very powerful move. And what I do, I either watch the hawks chasing the pigeons around Manhattan, or my favorite TV shows in the middle of the day were Housewives of Atlanta. versus Housewives of LA. I mean, they're both very distinctive cultures. But basically, anything to stop your mind for a bit. And, you know,
Thinking
if
time.
it's exercise, that's even better, or meditation, but something that just stops everybody coming into your head. Because I found it exhausting. I mean, but to do it for a long time, you've got to be able to create space.
Yeah. And you need time because you get a lot of information coming. So you actually need a bit of time to process it.
It's endless.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like not listening to the news for a day, because then it's a day old, so it's no longer valuable, and you saved all of that time. Yeah. But it's tough. I mean, any leadership job is really, really tough. And not everybody is up for that, you know.
Yeah, and you're always you never feel you're doing a great job. Most you can have a good day or something good will happen on various pieces, but there's always more you can
Never
do.
done.
There's always other things. So you just that.
It's never finished. I mean, the metaphor I used was when I was a little kid, I went to the ocean down where I grew up in Australia. I asked my dad why the waves never stop, and he started explaining, you know, lunar tidal flows and things. And now I sort of, in my mind, I saw work as the waves constantly coming at me, and in my mind, I sort of physically turned with my back to it. And once you can't see something, it stops.
Yeah.
In your mind. So that was sort of the way I tried to control it. But it's hard. But let me turn it open here too. And if you're sitting in the middle, I might be able to see you because there are spotlights in my face here. But lady here first. Yeah. By the way, we have the New York Fire Department in the building. Apparently there's a fire engine over there. I think somebody opened a door they shouldn't have opened upstairs. That's the ringing sound. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jemima, a fellow Aussie. I was wondering, what is a mistake that you have made at some point in your career, and what did you learn from it?
So many of them. It took me a long time to feel to actually get out of the comfort of just having done all the work, done all the analysis, but someone else would be the one doing the presenting and other pieces. And I remember Lowell pulling me aside one time and saying, your job is to influence the room. And if you don't talk, you don't influence the room. And then as soon as he said, you're not doing your job well, there was a fire lit underneath me, as opposed to what I felt was being self-promoting by talking and other things like that. So I've had to learn a lot how not to raise my hand like this, but like this, for the things that are important. And even to this day, as many times, I'm often the only woman in a room. I was, just until last month, was the second of the top 50 banks. There's only one woman the last 3 years. So finally, there's one more of us. Gunjan, also a McKinsey alumni. And you realize that you've got this thing. If you have to lean in, you have to talk up, you have to have that influence. So it doesn't sound like a mistake per se, but it was, because it's one where too often, if you're not learning these new skill sets, getting out of your comfort zone and other things, then I really regret took too long for me to lean in. Yeah.
Over here. Just behind you here.
Thank you so much for being here with us. I wanted to ask, what's one advice that you give to your kids while they build and navigate their careers?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of different pieces. One of them is I always tell them, you can have it all, but you're not going to have it all at the same time. So you're going to have different phases in your life. You're probably going to have several different careers in your life, because most of you guys will be working for much of your life. And some of those careers will be more successful than others, at different points. So that's okay. So I'm usually telling them just to chill a bit, because it feels like there's too many pressures on everyone. Look, I worked part-time for 5 years, and I made CEO of Citi. So you don't have to be in such a rush for everything. And just enjoy each phase of your life and each phase of your career. and don't wish it to be the next one or the one that you just were in. Just make the most of the time, but don't try and get the expectations down. You do not have to be Superman and Superwoman. So yes, you can have it all, but it will be spread over time, and enjoy each moment as much as you can. And if you're really unhappy, do something about it. Yeah, they don't listen to me though. They're 23 and 25. So as a parent, you get fired as a parent. You hope to be hired as a part-time consultant.
I would just add to the mistake question and tying it to what conversations. I've also got 2 kids. And it's mainly to young people who've come to work over the years, come to work for us. If you're constantly got your head up for the next thing, I mean, there's a real tension between showing you've got game, and as Jane said, leaning in, being prepared to speak up in meetings,
Learning.
but asking your bosses, when you get your annual review, well, what would I have to do in order to get the next job all the time? And my advice is trust the system. We'll find you. If you've got talent, we'll find you. If you're constantly asking, it's sort of distasteful. And, careers are made by doing what you're paid to do really well. And then anybody who's doing something really well, you want to give them more, not give them less. So just trust the system a little bit. And if the system ultimately disappoints you, then you're either in the wrong place or it's the wrong, it's the wrong company or there's something wrong. So then you've got to act differently. I'll take something over this side. Gentleman up there in the blue, I think.
Thank you so much for your time. My question actually directs to both of you. What is the leadership style that you see within each other that you think can be greatly complementary to your leadership principle? Thank you.
That can be
complementary to your leadership principle.
Well, I'll go first. Jane is extremely likable, and she immediately makes people feel comfortable. And once people are comfortable, they're more open with you. So I think she's obviously intelligent and thoughtful and strategic and all the sort of traditional CEO qualities. But a lot of people, when they enter a room or in front of strangers, don't realize you're not just dealing with business people, you're dealing with other human beings. And I think that ability to get people from the get-go to be willing to listen and engage with you, at its essence, gets down to some sort of likability, empathy.
And I know a lot of what I learned from James. I remember at McKinsey, he has an assurance and confidence, but not arrogance. And I think that's because you want to follow people who have a conviction about what they're doing. There's a confidence about them, but no arrogance. There's an openness, a curiosity. And I certainly learned from James that you've got to stand up for yourself. You put a point of view on the table. If something's wrong, you call it out in a way that's not offensive, isn't being an asshole, but you're someone who always stands the ground for different things like that. It was very helpful for me building more confidence.
We should go into business together after this. Actually, it'd be fun.
It would be fun.
Up here. Oh. Lady, just to the right of the light bulb.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. My question is, how have you navigated goals that may have not come to fruition? And how do you know when to pivot, be patient, or learn to admit that something hasn't panned out?
Yeah, there was a job I had really wanted and had worked hard for, had been given, and then it got rescinded because the situation changed. And I was surprised myself. I was really upset around it, and I had my sort of couple of weeks of just being a bit down. And I was like, okay, just get it out your system, and then what are you going to do about it? And I think that's that piece of never be a victim that becomes very important. Of just take control back of your destiny, and what are you going to do about it? And Citi's had all sorts of different issues where things have gone wrong, and you've just like, oh God. And you let yourself, I found I just let myself have the 10 minutes of wallowing and go, okay, that's done. What are we going to do about it? And moving forward that way. And that's definitely helps. But you do often have to give yourself a moment or a day or a week or whatever it is, but then get on with it afterwards. Move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody has disappointments.
Oh,
right?
yes.
You have screw-ups
Yeah.
and I was demoted by the boss I had at Merrill Lynch and eventually left for a smaller job. And everybody said, but it's a smaller job. And I said, yeah, but I feel better doing something I feel good about doing. So at some point, it's not about the size of the job or the responsibility. It's about being true to yourself. But you're all going to have disappointments. Sorry to be a spoiler, but it's called life.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's also things you also tend, I'm sure you are all going to be these overachievers and do amazing things, but there's going to be times that you feel you've let people down. I can remember I had one earnings call and I didn't do a great job in it. And oh God, I was like, God damn it. Why, I just beat up on myself. And I'm like, well, that's not helping anybody. And so, next day I stopped beating up on myself after I'd apologized, and it was like, okay, get on with running the company. So that's the other thing you've got to learn, because often you're your own worst enemy.
Sure.
And other people are fine, but you feel, oh God, I've let people down, and that's the worst feeling.
Gentleman back here. Oh, you got the microphone now. You got to grab it.
Guess it's on me. Thank you both for your time this evening. So to me, at least, it seems that one of the key roles as a chief executive is managing relationships with increasingly external stakeholders to your institution. And as the chief executive of a multinational financial institution, those external constituents become heads of state, policymakers. I would love to hear a little bit about how you define success in those relationships.
Oh, you go first. I'm going to think about that one.
I guess trust. I used to do something. I think I told Jane about this, but it wasn't with country heads, right? You rarely, when you meet a country head, maybe Citigroup was different, but when we met country heads, it was largely ceremonial. Everything was prescriptive beforehand. Everything was agreed beforehand. And you're going in to sort of show good faith or announce that you're opening a new office or something. We did a big thing in Paris recently. I met Macron, and in fact, we sat next to him at dinner one night together. So they're largely ceremonial, but I tried before anything that hit the press that related to Morgan Stanley that I thought was like not good. Stuff hits the press all the time that's not good, but then the stuff that's not good, kind of really big. I would call Jay Powell. I'd call the head of the New York Fed. I'd call the head of the SEC. I'd call the head of the OCC and the head of the FDIC. So 5 regulators the night before, and I'd say, tomorrow morning you're going to read this in the press. Your team, you will draw your own conclusions. I'm going to give you my view for what it's worth. It's either a really big deal and we're doing something about it. It's not a big deal. The journalist is vindictive. Trust me on this, whatever. And by acknowledging when it was a big problem and owning that in advance, built a lot of goodwill when we actually had problems, because they say, you know what, I think James will get on it and he'll fix it. So it gets back to you're dealing with human beings. You have to build trust with the person, not just title to title.
That's the best advice. Another thing I would just add on a slightly different flavor, our old chairman, Dick Parsons, who just passed away, amazing man. And one of his, I have a list of Parsonisms written down. One of them he had is never check a generous impulse. So when someone who you're working with or may not always like, but a stakeholder, and something tough has happened for them, call them up. And that never checking the generous impulse for someone if they've had something tough is, I think, it's again that human being piece of it. But you then it really changes if it's authentic. It really changes the relationship you have with someone they remember.
The gentleman who we skipped in the back have
Yeah.
to come back, and then I'll come back to the lady here in the third row.
Thank you so much for sharing today. My question is curious, just back to your young age, maybe
You remember
day.
that far back, James?
Sorry, maybe
Take
just
this on the road, really.
Oh yeah, definitely. So just back to the day before you become the partner, maybe just associate or just young guy. So what do you think the most important thought your mind can motivate you more and to quickly development in the future? Yeah, just give us some advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Most important thing to develop? Sorry.
All right, just to, the most important thought can keep myself or keep us to development and to become a real leader in the future. Just become the young age. Yeah.
I think we generally under-index. If you want to be in a leadership role, by definition, you're leading other people, you're creating a followership.
Yeah.
No point leading if nobody's following you. And for that, people will follow generally for three reasons combined. One is you've given them a vision of where you're going. Two is you can articulate it in a way that they understand. And three is they can feel that you actually believe it rather than just saying it, so you're authentic. So it's a combination, and the piece, we're either authentic or we're not. So that's based on who you are as a person. Having a vision is a little bit of training and strategic, work and so on. But the piece that I think gets under exercised is communication.
Yeah.
The importance of speaking in a way that everybody can understand you, because what they can understand, they will follow. What people don't understand, at the first obstacle, they won't follow. So I would say to young people, I took a course here when I was at business school in 1985. I don't know if we have it now, but it's a communications course, and we're videotaped. And it's awful, right? Because you've all got tics, and you pull your hair or you do something. But you get, by doing it once, you get better. By doing it 5 times, you get a lot better, and so on.
Yeah. So
just learning to be more effective communicators rather than, you got to do the casework, you got to do the analytics, you got to do all the stuff you do, but don't forget that part of the program.
Yeah.
And Jane is obviously a great communicator, and it helps. It helps a lot, right?
English accent.
That helps too.
In America, that you're much smarter than you are.
That's a winner. Australian used to be a winner, but
yeah, that's good advice.
lady here, yeah.
Yeah, you went.
Oh, do you have the microphone? Oh, you have it.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take. I think we've got time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions, and we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Lady here. Yeah, yell it out.
Yeah. So so in running a global bank, how to sort of prioritize, you've got some things which are some things as a CEO that hit your desk. It's the plane that is either in pieces on the ground or is about 10 feet off the ground because no one else could solve the problem and you're the only one that can. And it's usually at the worst point. So you always have to have some capacity to be up to whatever the crisis might be, and that you've got to put your time on. I think every quarter about what are the things that I need to achieve this quarter, and kind of what's the North Star for the quarter, and I'll tell my team that. So either, I want to focus in this area, I want to focus on a couple of different things and make sure they really get bedded down, or I've got the time to think about it. And then we just make sure that the time's carved out to do it. Because you can get very caught up in all the activity and all the things you have to do every day and not actually achieve the big things that need to get done as to lead the bank forward rather than just do the day job as opposed to advance. But it can be hard. Yeah.
Lady here.
Thank you so much. Quick question first. You mentioned
yes.
You're both international.
You might need the microphone in the back rows. You're about to compliment our accents, so I just thought we should do it again.
Thank you so much. So
regarding your British accent, we hear a lot of internationals. You both are internationals. Do you think it was a competitive edge for you being international, or was it a bit more challenging at certain times? And a second quick question is, what would you want us to remember from this evening? Like one thing, some of us are graduating soon, or in 2 weeks actually. What is something you would want us to take with us into the professional world? Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think it's rather than just international, it's a global mindset. It's not that there's only one way of doing things that is right, or that will be successful. And I do think for me, having a breadth of experiences in different countries has helped me enormously, because I don't tend to be quite so much thinking in a particular box. I'm much more open to other ideas. And different ways of doing things. And I think that's been really, really helpful. And it's just innate on it. And, immigrants, we tend to work harder too, so.
I think being an outsider is an advantage and disadvantage. Sometimes, when people, I still don't know what's going on in baseball, and, and you're left out, and, in certain levels, you didn't grow up in this society. And whether the accent is a good accent or a bad accent, or that quickly disappears, right? It's about you as a person, and do you understand and embrace the culture here? If you're constantly coming as a foreigner and telling all the Americans what they're doing wrong, that doesn't work, right? You've got to bring goodness rather than just pull down the badness stuff. So I think it's more, I think Jane's exactly right. It's having a global mindset. I lived in Tokyo for a while. I lived in Hong Kong. I lived in Madrid for a while. I spent a lot of time in Germany, and this was before I became a CEO. So I had all cultures to me were interesting. And I think if you approach that with the world that way, then you can get along with anybody.
I look at my management team. I have 2 Pakistanis, 3 Indian. I have 1 other Brit, and a couple of Americans and a Mexican. The one thing that unites us is pretty well the management team all speaks bad English. So cultural element to it, but everyone's got that mindset to it. And I think that's the piece, rather than where you're from, what you're doing, that's differentiating.
I'll take one last question here. Let's see, in the back there with the glasses, the gentleman, lady there. Sorry, yep.
Thank you, so lucky. Thank you so much for being here. I'm curious to know, kind of take a step back, apart from, running this multinational company, you have many roles in life. Would you be able to name 3 most important things to you in life? And a small, tiny follow-up question: what is your phone lock screen picture? Just curious.
What's
your phone screen picture?
So the 3 most important things in my life are Gordon, Cameron, and Bert, my husband and my 2 sons. So I always think one of the things for you all, just if I think of what's the takeaway for you, your personal life and your professional life, one will be important at some point in your career, other ones others, but just make sure you're happy. And happiness can be learning in a job, succeeding in a job, doing other things. But so for me, it's my family is the most important thing. They're not happy. It's not, nothing's great. You're only as happy as your least happy child. And then, but that piece of, be happy. If you're happy, you're likely to be more successful. You're going to be better at the job you're doing. You're going to be more infectious to other people. And so if something's not right, fix it and have the courage to do that.
And what's on your screenshot on your phone?
My screenshot is my son, his graduation photograph. We're a bit of fun one with his best friend, where they're, that one, because they were really happy that day. So it always makes me smile because they're goofing around, it was a really happy day. He was at Duke, unfortunately, he never got into Columbia.
I would. My screenshot is a photo of my partner with a baseball cap on, standing on the beach, and she's got the sun behind her. It's just a great photo. Just to finish on that, I would say the people who I've seen happiest at work are the people who are doing things that inside them they want to do. And a lot of the times, particularly when we start, we have to do things to sort of get going and so on. But at some point, you've got to say what's true to you and your values. Is it the prestige of the job? Is it the money? Is it the location? So what's driving you? And if the substance of the work, you don't get up in the morning and think, this is kind of interesting to figure out if you're working on a marketing team, figure out a new promotion campaign, new advertising campaign. If you're in sales, figuring out, a new way of doing things. And that's how you keep growing and stay invested in your career. So if it isn't working, I started off as a lawyer for 4 years, and it just wasn't that interesting for me. And so I left. And you've got to be prepared to make choices to find the things that are motivating you, not what you're supposed to do or others tell you is good to do. Yeah. So with that,
I think sort of reinventing yourself, right? To have the courage, you'll be able to reinvent yourself many times. Yeah.
But listen, this has been a great honor to host Jane here. She is, I think, doing a phenomenal job. I described the Citigroup job several years ago when somebody asked me, what's the hardest bank job in the world? I said, it's to run Citigroup. And I think she's...
Thanks, James.
but that makes it the most interesting job.
It does.
Right? Because you've got enormous challenges to meet. And I think in 4 years, in that second year when you started doing a lot of the restructuring and selling off, and you did sell the retail stuff, you really transformed it. So, I hope that you will be doing, and I expect you to be doing it for a decade, and you'll, having that kind of length of time to fundamentally change a global institution is what it takes. And I think you've done a phenomenal job. So I want to thank Jane for joining us here at Columbia Business School.
Thank you. Thank you.